Thanks, Phil, for agreeing to do this interview.
Pleasure, Mark.
And in the last 12 months, you seem to have received more media coverage than ever before. Why is that, would you think?
Well, I remember Rupert Murdoch's newspaper describing me once as reclusive. And in a sense, I guess that's true. But for this cause, I guess I've come out of my shell. Cruelty to powerless animals has become so egregious, I don't think that any decent human being can any longer be passive. I guess sitting on a fence is for cowards and crows. I've always taken the side of the powerless underdog. In this case, of course, I'm just doing it more publicly, and this is a conscious decision I've made. I'm going to have to get out there more frequently and speak more forcibly. So it is a decision I've made very consciously.
Now, in the last year or so, one of the landmark events, according to many people, has been what they're calling the Great Debate, which was that the debate that was organised by the Wheeler Centre and the ABC, should animals be off the menu. And it's literally gone viral worldwide. Why do you think it's been as popular as it's been?
It tapped in to the current zeitgeist, where animal cruelty is now just not acceptable. And we tapped into that at the right time. Like Victor Hugo said, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And the time has come. This is our time. Animal rights now is the greatest social issue since the abolition of slavery. It's also a fact that we utterly destroyed those preposterous arguments of the meat lobby. They expected the audience, and they insulted the audience, to continually stand under a Niagara of nonsense. And the audience just did not tolerate it. So we utterly obliterated every single ploy that they came up with. And we won overwhelmingly, simply because we had a fourth person in our side. The fourth person was the truth. And it was painstakingly obvious that the emperor has no clothes, they had nowhere to go, and that their definition of truth was an undiscovered lie. They just didn't get away with it. And the zeitgeist says that we touched a nerve, and as a consequence, as you say, it went viral.
You started that debate by quoting from Shakespeare's King Lear, and in particular you mentioned that part where the blind Duke of Gloucestershire had said, or was asked, how do you see the world? And his answer was, I see the world feelingly. Now, why do you think it is that most people have lost the ability to feel, and how can we somehow get that back?
I have a slightly more optimistic view of the future. I remember talking to a friend of mine in the United States, and he said that he has confidence in the goodness of the human spirit. I don't think we've entirely lost our capacity to feel. It's just that we've become so heavily sanitized from the grim reality, if you like, of our food choices. We've been kept away from the cruelty aspect of it. And the deceitful tactics, of course, that the animal industrial complex has used has conned us into this false thinking that the cruelty does not exist, when in fact that it does. So it's not that we've stopped caring, we've just stopped knowing. I think that's the problem. I'm very rarely surprised, in fact I'm not surprised at how little we know. But I'm constantly surprised by how little we sometimes care. You see, there is a sort of complicity, an unholy pact, if you like, negotiated ignorance between the producer and the consumer. The consumer promises not to ask, and the producer promises not to tell. And between these two groups are the facilitators, the media and the governments, who seek to mollify the meat industry lobby groups who are so powerful, and who ultimately grease these wheels of duplicity, dressing it up in dollars and in dross. So that is the challenge we face. I think the capacity to care and the capacity to show compassion, to be responsible and ethical and think about the environment and human health and animal welfare and animal rights still exists. But the nexus between our animal cousins and us has been broken and pushed apart by the animal industrial complex. And we've got to bring that circle of compassion closer into our homes, into our hearts, and into our daily lives. So I haven't given up hope, but I do concede that sometimes it's very difficult to see compassion when all we hear are screams.
Now, in that debate, you offered two challenges to your opposing panellists. The first one was to name one disease caused by a vegetarian diet.
Oh, yes.
And the second was you challenged them to show a copy of Earthlings to their friends and colleagues. Now, since then, did any of them actually take up any of those challenges?
Oh, good questions, Mark, yes. After the debate, they sheepishly admitted that they could not come up with a single disease caused by a vegetarian diet. I was quite delighted when they actually made that admission. But one of the opposition refused actually to watch Earthlings because he asked me quite explicitly, how do I know the film footage wasn't photoshopped? So I guess there is none so blind as those who will not see. But who can blame them, really? After all, we're just beaten them on every single front. You know, animal cruelty, water resources, human health, the environment, food production efficiency. We'd wipe the floor with them. What else could he say? The only thing he could say was something preposterous. And luckily for him, the ABC turned off the cameras by this stage. I'd love to have had that on film.
That would have been good, definitely. Now, a lot of people are really grateful for the fact that you've introduced a new word to many people's vocabulary, which is ahimsa. And a lot of people talking about compassion use that word a lot. But you've also started using another word that's also from ancient Sanskrit. Do you want to mention what that word is and why that's also a very powerful word?
Sure. I love the word ahimsa. I always say that the most beautiful word ever written at any time in any country in human history came from the Upanishads about 5,000 years ago. Ahimsa, non-violence to any living being. I often think that we hear about the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And we believe that came from Jesus, and indeed it did. In fact, it goes back even further to the Babylonian Jew, Hillel. Goes back to about 70 BC. It even goes back a lot further, about 500 years BC, to the Analects of Confucius. So it's a common thread running through all spiritual discourse. Now, I often say that in whatever we do, all we've got to do is simply tell the truth, fearlessly and forcefully. And that is what the Sanskrit word satyagraha means, the truth force. The wise Chinese also have a term, zhengjiao. Listen to the friend who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. So telling the truth forcefully, politely, compassionately is a powerful tool in our quest for animal welfare and animal rights.
Now, you often quote Upton Sinclair, and one of his quotes is, "It's very hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it." Now, what can we do to get people to look beyond just trying to get their salary and put their morals and ethics above it?
I don't know if we'll ever fully succeed in doing so. Some people will, but many people won't. And some people will change their ways for their health or for the environment or for other reasons. But when meat eating becomes even more of a social stigma, I think we'll see a radical change and a quantum shift in our thinking. But let's remember that businesses don't give up their profits lightly. They fight very hard to keep them. Let's look at the tobacco industry. See how hard they fought in the face of overwhelming odds. Look how hard the asbestos industry fought for the same reasons. Look how hard the car industry fought. Look how hard the gun lobby in the United States is fighting to give people the right to bear arms. Remember how hard the landmine industry is fighting at the moment to stop legislation to put them out of business. And we should never forget how hard the slave owners fought to protect their businesses too. So I tend to approach it from a variety of different perspectives. The supply side of the industry will always fight to preserve the profits. Let's accept that. One of the solutions, and only one, is for us to go after the demand side, to the consumers of these hideous, vile, disgusting products. And I think ultimately people will respond to enlightened self-interest. And that's why I think your group is doing such a powerful job, and you're getting so much traction, certainly in Australia, and as far as I'm aware, internationally as well, is because you are providing information that shows that changing our diets delivers a wide range, a smorgasbord of wonderful opportunities to live a better, cleaner, more ethical, more intelligent, more sustainable life. So I think ultimately, in the marketplace of ideas, that is where the battle will be won. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen because it must. That's how I feel about it.
Now, you've described meat and dairy not as a food, but as a drug. Do you want to explain why?
Yes, indeed. Just as an experiment, just Google 2 words, meat and drug, and you'll get tens of millions of hits. Now, as you know better than probably anybody I know, that 80% of all the antibiotics that are ever produced are actually given to animals, which human beings subsequently eat. No wonder we're getting all these things called superbugs that we just can't fix. Now, why is it a drug? You've only got to listen to the irrational, rabid, aggressive responses from those who are hooked on devouring animal products. They use the same kind of intemperate, illogical arguments that drug addicts use, which basically boils down to, leave us alone, mind your own business, we know what you're doing. Who are you to tell me what to do? It's my right. The same arguments used by anyone suffering the effects of withdrawal from illegal substance abuse. And even good people who actually try to get off the meat-eating drug experience a lot of difficulty. So we just simply need to get the message out. I'm convinced that I need to be a lot more forceful in speaking to people about these issues. Restaurants, as far as I'm concerned, who dress up a dead animal dish, don't fool me for a second. I know that they're in the business of putting lipstick on a corpse. That's a fact. And restaurants who serve meat to their customers are really gastronomic tobacconists, as far as I'm concerned. So people will change, but it won't be an easy transition, like anyone getting off any kind of drug. But as soon as they're off it and they've made the realization that they can't continue that way, they live happier, healthier lives and are better for it. So that is what sustains me, I guess.
Now, Linda McCartney's most famous quote is that if all slaughterhouses had glass walls, that everyone would be vegetarian. Now, if it was as easy as that, what can we do to literally put a glass wall in front of every single slaughterhouse?
That's a very good question. We need to do exactly what the meat industry has already done. Get the message out on TV, into the print media, into the media generally. Certainly in the West, we've come to believe that if something is not on TV, it's not true. Well, if that's going to be the zeitgeist, we need to be on TV too. We need to be in the media. And I'm just thinking about Goethe, who said that mankind is motivated not by reason, but by ritual. Well, let us consider our rituals as well. And insofar as having glass walls around slaughterhouses, I think we also need glass walls in the hospital wards dealing with cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. That ought to give people a wake-up call. And let's televise that as well. Just like we do right now for road trauma campaigns, which have been very successful here in Australia. Those campaigns showed people the consequences of drink and driving. After all, the government does say, if you drink and drive, you're a bloody idiot. Well, let's show the public that the livestock industry does some terrible things to the environment, to human health, to other animals, to the rivers, to the oceans, the forests. Let's show them the carnage. And then maybe the government will have the guts to run a commercial which says, if you're not a vegan, you're a bloody vandal. Because that is the overwhelming truth. And while we're about it, let's make it mandatory for every slaughterhouse to have CCTV cameras. A very simple, low-cost choice. Let's see, let the consumers see where their food comes from. Let's look into those vile gulags of despair. And after all, what have these guys in the meat industry got to lose? They've been telling us how good things are. They've got nothing to lose by doing it. People with nothing to hide nothing. Here's their opportunity to prove it. I would also suggest that we need a kind of econometric model which shows how much money is wasted on dealing with the consequences of this hideous industry, particularly on human health and on the environment. Let's show the community what it really costs when we factor in those externalities. Because that money that is being wasted could be used for education, for human health, for infrastructure, for the arts, things that really matter, things that make us a civilized society. The meat industry is many things. Civilized, it most certainly is not.
Now, in the last year, the live export issue has got as much publicity as it ever has. But do you think we're making real progress on that issue? And if not, what else do we have to be doing?
Yeah, that's a fine question. We are certainly making progress out there on the street. There's no doubt about that. The Australian community is rightly repulsed by the shocking images of what they have seen happening in Pakistan, right across the Middle East, into Indonesia. There's no doubt about it. They have seen what those nations have done to Australian animals who were born on Australian soil and then sent on this perilous journey a long way on those death ships to the Middle East where their eyes are stabbed out and their tendons are slashed. I'm saddened because while most progressive nations were sort of developing industries in science, aviation, aerospace, research, computers, engineering, clean energy, our grasping politicians bragged about our economy riding on the sheep's back. Isn't it about time we learn to walk on our own 2 feet? So that industry has gone way past its use-by date. And Australian history books tell of touching stories of young diggers, soldiers in World War I, who rather than leave their whaler horses behind in the Middle East after the war, took that sad and lonely walk away with their beloved mounts and ended their lives with a bullet into the brain. They did that rather than leave the animals in those countries. The very countries that we are sending tens of millions of Australian animals to their gruesome deaths. I wonder what those diggers would have to say if they knew that. This is a humiliating insult to the Australian ethos, I'm afraid to say. So I think we need to get this industry out of our systems. If this industry didn't exist, who would invent it? What kind of person would invent such a ghastly industry? Nobody I know. But we need to all work together to galvanize ourselves into action with a common cause. And that means getting the consumption of meat and dairy off the agenda completely. And the sooner that day dawns, the better.
Now, is there anything else that you want to add?
Well, Mark, I'd really like to inject a sense of urgency into the conversation. We really are running out of time. In the work I do for Sea Shepherd, I see what's happening in the oceans. And it's a terrifying thought. I read in one recent journal that The oceans are dying in our time. By 2048, all our fisheries will be dead. The lungs and the arteries of the earth. Now, anyone with a child who's a teenager should be terrified, because none of them are going to see a retirement age. Now, if you put that into our thinking, we know that time is not our friend any longer. And we also know that our adversaries are big, powerful, well-resourced, deceitful, mendacious, cunning. And every moment we delay makes them stronger. And they know it. So really, we don't have a moment to lose. The screams in the slaughterhouse will end only when this industry stops. And the sooner we stop it, the better. We don't have a moment to lose.
Thank you so much for your time, Phil. That was really great.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure. Thank you.